Good afternoon, my YouTube viewers. It's Crystal here. I'm just here this afternoon because I wanted to do a code review for you. Basically, what happened in the June 2022 Kaggle competition, they had a data set that had lots of null values in it, and what you had to do was you had to scroll through the rows. And then after you scroll through the rows, you scroll through the columns to find all the null values and impute them. And so basically, that's what you had to do. And then you had to put the imputed values in a data frame and submit it to Kaggle to be scored. And then basically what happened was I didn't really have the skill to do that because I had never done anything like that, and especially to impute the null values. So I had to borrow somebody else's code just to get it to work. And so I couldn't make a code review on that since it wasn't my code, and I didn't feel comfortable doing a code review on code that I didn't fully understand. So I decided the best thing to do was yesterday and today was I was going to make my own small little data set with some null values in it and loop through the rows and the columns to find out what all the null values were. And then after I did that, I was going to impute them. And then after that, I was going to put the imputed values into a data frame and do it like I was going to submit it to Kaggle because I wanted to learn how to do it, but I thought that the data set that Kaggle was using was too big for my purposes, and as a result of that, I just decided to do it myself with a very small data set so I could get the hang of doing it. So what I've done is I'm doing a code review of this data set that I created where I looped through it and I imputed it and I prepared it into a data frame. So that's what we're going to do. So I used Google Colab to make this program, and Google Colab is free. So that's the great thing about Google Colab. It's free. You don't have to pay for it. And then I use Google Colab for most of my work and also Kaggle Jupyter Notebook. So the first thing I did after I created my program, first thing I did was I imported the libraries. So the libraries that I started with was Pandas to create data frames and manipulate them, NumPy to do numerical calculations and create NumPy arrays, Matplotlib for graphics, and Seaborn for statistical graphics. But we didn't do any graphics in this particular exercise, and the reason why is because I had my hands full just trying to loop through rows and columns and then impute them and prepare it into a data frame. So you didn't get any graphics this time, sorry. So we've created the data set. This is a really small data set. It's got 10 rows and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, 10 rows and 6 columns. So it's a very small data frame. You might want to make your own data frame. Basically what this is this is just a data frame with me and people I know, our ages. I got some of the ages wrong as well. I got my age wrong. So I'm not that old, but I'm not going to change it. Where we were born, what our vocation is, and what my relationship to these people is. So I created this data frame, and you can see that I created the data frame, and you can see I've got 8 null values in this data frame. So now what we're going to do is we're going to loop through the null values, and I included lots of print statements in there because obviously I had to do a lot of troubleshooting. but you can take the print statements out if you want. So, first thing we're going to do is we created a blank list called Null Values, a blank list called Rows, a blank list called Calls, and we created a data frame called Locate. For row in range len df, and then I used a lot of print statements so you can see, because obviously I had to make sure that it worked. In order for me to make sure that it worked, I did print statements. But when you're doing that, if you don't want the print statements, you can either put a hash mark in front of the print statement, or you can just take the print statement out altogether. So I'll just put a hash mark in front of these print statements, and then we'll run it again. And then so we've taken the hash mark out of the print statements. So you can see here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 cells that have null values. And what we've done is we've gone through it and picked out the null values. So for row in range len df, for call in df, if pd isna df dot row column, so that means if there's a null value in that data point, print df column dot iloc row, which we did, null values dot append df dot loc row column, so you're appending the data point to null values, rows dot append df row column row, so this is telling you the row that it's in, and calls dot append call, and this is telling you that the column that it's in. And then you say print row and column number is df row call row and then call. So you can see right here where it says row and column number, it's a 0 birthplace. The value of the cell is, and then you print value of the cell is df call iloc row, value of the cell is nan. So that's what it's done, and then we can take this out as well if you want to, because I'm just doing a hash mark because I want to keep it in there. But when you do it yourself, if you don't want all those print statements, you don't have to have the print statements. And now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare a submission file, because I wanted to do it as if I was submitting it to Kaggle, although I'm not. Submission equals PD data frame null values. So we've got the null values there. Submission dot insert LOC0 column equals row column value equals NP arrange len submission. Submission dot column equals row call value submission. So you can see this is our submission data frame, and I did it similar to the way it would be done in Kaggle. And now what I've done is I have ordinally encoded the features that are strings or text space. And the reason for this is because we're going to be using iterative imputer. And when we use iterative imputer, it only imputes numeric values. And because it only imputes numeric values, then we have to do it that way. If you wanted to impute like the most commonly used value, then you could use like a mode. you could impute, you could add it to the mode, but I decided to use iterative imputer because someone whose code I borrowed was using iterative imputer. I thought, well, I'll just stick with iterative imputer. But the thing is, it's like, yeah, so if you just wanted to insert the most commonly used value in there, then you could use mode, and then mode, it doesn't care if it's a number or a string. So we had to import sklearn preprocessing from sklearn.preprocessing import ordinal encoder, enc equals ordinal encoder. I said for a column in df, if df call dot dtype equals object, df call equals nc fit transform, df call dot values reshape -1 df. So now you can see the data frame. The data frame is now numeric except for the null values. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check for null values and impute. And the person who I borrowed this code for, he used XGBoost, but we didn't do any predictions on this, but that's just what he used. So I thought, well, if he's used that, I'm going to use it too. So we import XGBoost, we import iterative imputer, and then we do our work. INP equals iterative imputer, estimator equals XGBoost, XGregressor, estimators equals 100, random state equals 42, and then I hashed out the tree method GPU hist because I'm not using the GPU, and I'm not sure exactly what GPU hist is, but it didn't work when I tried to use it. So I just put a hash mark in there. And it said missing values equals np.nan, max iter equals 10, initial strategy equals mean, imputation order equals ascending, verbose equals 2, random state equals 42. So d : equals INP fit transform df. So basically that was the piece of code that I had to borrow from somebody else, and I don't even know if I needed to use XGBregressor because I didn't do any predictions, but maybe you need XGBregressor. And so basically you can see here it worked. You got a lot of warnings, but it worked. It said linear is now deprecated in favor of squared error, so I don't know, but we'll just worry about that later. And now we look at the df, and all of the values have been imputed, and you can see that there are no more null values. But what we had to do was, and now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the imputed values. So locate rows equals rows, locate calls equals calls, imputed value is an empty list, imputed rows is an empty list. For I in range len locate, df rows equals rows, df rows equals rows I, df calls equals call I, and it says print df loc, df rows, df calls, imputed rows, append df loc, df rows, row call, imputed value dot append df dot loc, df rows, df calls values. Imputed rows equals PD data frame imputed rows. Imputed value equals PD data frame imputed value. Print imputed rows, imputed values. And so I did a lot of printing. And so this is the printing that it did. And then you can, if you want to, you can like put a hash mark in there or even delete it. And then, but just like whenever you're writing the program, it's always a good time. It's a good chance to use a lot of print statements so you can print your work, so you can check your work. So now you've got your imputed rows is 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, and then we do the imputed value. Now what we're going to do is we're going to prepare the submission. Submission row num equals imputed rows. Submission value equals imputed value. Submission dot drop row call axis equals 1 and place equals true. Submission equals submission row num value. Submission to CSV is submission CSV index equals false submission. So you can also look over here and you can see we've got a submission CSV here. So, you know, if you wanted to, you could submit it for grading somewhere. But that was it. I worked on this code. I started working on this code yesterday and all last night and this morning. And it's not easy. It's not as easy as it looked. Or maybe it's just not easy for me, you know, because I realized that, you know, I'm not that skilled. And in order for me to improve upon my skill level, I need to work on lots of problems. And since I had difficulty doing that Kaggle competition, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and make my own data frame and do it myself, and it'll be a lot easier. So that's it. That concludes this code review. We went through the code, went through lots of work so you can see all the work that I did. And you can try it yourself. You know, you've got the code now, and you can try this yourself since you've got the code. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this code review. If you like my video, please like, subscribe, and share. And I want to thank all of my subscribers for supporting my channel. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I look forward to making more videos for you in the future.